Hello, my name is Dave Wright, FF_Spaceman, and you are listening to the Dynasty Hotseat.
Yes, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Dynasty Hot Seat, the only Dynasty show that is a certified inferno. And today, we got Dave Wright back on the show for, maybe the most exciting week of the off season, right, Dave? It's draft week. We've just seen where the chips have fallen with these rookies. I can't wait to get into it and chatting to you. But for those who may not know who you are, do you just want to let people know who you are? Where can they find you online, and what are you up to?
Yeah, like I said, I'm Dave Wright over at FF_Spaceman on Twitter, and I'm a writer for DLF. Over there, I've been there for 2 years now. I don't do a ton of content over there, but I'm hoping to amp that back up soon. But then I have a Patreon with most of my stuff is free over my Patreon, where I have a lot of free databases during the season. I have a database that updates every morning with the most recent advanced metrics from all over the internet, all in one spot. So I think it's a lot of people's go-to for content creation and, for dynasty and fantasy trade, fantasy. And then I also have a lot of a prospect database with over 2,000 college prospects in there I think there's I would say at least over 200 different metrics in there. And then, so this is, I'm the nerd guy, I'm the spreadsheet guy, but I also like to do a lot of dynasty philosophy and just big picture thinking to try to help people with their dynasty teams. So that's what I'm all about. And you know what? I love coming on podcasts. I always used to tell myself when I was listening to content when 5-6 years ago, I was like, man, if I could just get on one podcast, I'd be so excited. And here I am on the hot seat for my second time. I'm glad I wasn't too cold last time up to be welcome back. And one of the biggest weeks in Dynasty is the NFL draft. So this is pure excitement. I'm honored to be here, and I'm just fired up.
Yeah, me too. I can't wait to get chatting about these guys and just to see how different it is. Obviously, I've been doing kind of these mock drafts the whole off season, just how different it's going to be now that we see where these guys are actually going to be playing football. And you know what, Dave, we got a bit of sad news actually to start with. Do you know about 50% of the people watching this right now haven't hit that subscribe button? I mean, what's going on there, Dave? What can we do about that?
It's balderdash. It's amateurism. I am a subscriber. I've been for over a year and a half now. You have some of the, minus me, some of the really sharp minds in Dynasty give great advice. And I actually just love the format. So I highly recommend people to subscribe. So if you're not, and you know what, this was off the cuff. I will give a free copy of my premium NFL database, which has dating back to 2000, every player and fantasy relevant player to score a stat, whether it's a target or a fantasy point since 2000. I will give that to one of your subscribers for free. We'll figure out how we do that, but I will be doing that to who subscribes to your channel.
Wow, what an amazing, generous offer that is, Dave. Thank you so much. I can't wait to see who the lucky subscriber is that gets their hands on that amazing, wealth of data there. So, Dave, we're going to go into, after that amazing goodwill gesture, we're going to get into segment number 1, which is kind of like some hints and tips. And Dave, you said you have something on your mind, something you need to get out and tell the people. So what is it?
So I think Dynasty, this is a Dynasty show. I think that the biggest thing in Dynasty that doesn't get discussed enough and analyzed enough is Dynasty trading. I think it is like you always hear these buy low, sell highs. You should try to buy low on this player, sell high in this player, and use all this advice. I think a lot of it's generic advice. And I think my biggest advice to you is try to establish. I know this is heard in other places. It's not like an original thought, but I just want to stress it because it doesn't get talked about enough. I really think we should be trying to do win-win trades. Everyone likes to just a smash accept offer that comes into their inbox, and you don't really have to work for that. But what I really think that doesn't get talked about enough is being someone when you want to make a move on your dynasty roster, you know your league, you know who your league mates are that you're most likely to make a trade with. And you need to, I think it is extremely advantageous. It's not about how smart you are, how good at dynasty you are, or what have you, of being one of the first people that pops up in someone's mind when they need to go make a trade in a league and your name is it. They come with you and they know that you'll work with them. You'll compromise a little bit, try to work with what they want and try to get, and at the same time, making sure that you accomplish what you want to do. I just think these win-win trades should be thought of more often than just someone who's like, hey, I'm always going to send these mass amount of offers out to try to, I'm going to send out 20 offers or 100 offers and 1 out of 100 is going to get accepted and it's going to be a big win. I just don't think that's good for dynasty. I think leagues like that, I think they fail. I think it's not a good way. I think they're not very active leagues. And I think it makes other managers in the league pissed off. And just trying to craft that win-win trade and that's when you think about what do they want? It's not about, or hey, what can you work with to help them achieve your goals? Because, and Sean Siegel over at Rotoviz does this a lot. The FF Contrarian, the father of the Zero RB guy, he talks about when a trade happens in a league, oftentimes it's the person that there should be 2 winners and then 10 losers. You're the other 10, or depending on the league size, but 10 losers in the league and 2 winners. And that's what I think really should be motivating people to make trades. It's not about who's smarter, who's going to have the best, sexiest roster. It's about trying to win and achieve each other's goals, because I think that's how it gets done.
Yeah, I really like that. And one of the things I always like to do, especially when trading, is instead of sending an offer, I'll quite often just like shoot a message and be like, hey, what's up? Like, how you doing? Like, oh, I noticed like you need a quarterback, or like, hey, I'm interested in this player. Like, what do you think? And I always find it much easier to like get to that kind of win-win with like open discussion and like dialogue and like just like being like a nice person sometimes, right? That kind of helps rather than just like throwing, like you said, throwing shit at the wall and hoping something sticks, right?
And look, there's some really good dynasty managers who do succeed with throwing crap against the wall and getting those accepted. There's a lot of them out there, but I just don't think, for me, that's not how everyone should play the way they think is fun. And I think playing that way and developing relationships, because I think that's what determines what a league is fun. Yeah, winning is a lot of fun, but the leagues that are most fun is when some news happens in the NFL and your league chat is blowing up because you have relationships with these people. The league's successful. It's an active league. And I think that's what really sometimes gets lost in dynasty, is you see people scaling up for content creation or scaling up for different ways. That's what makes dynasty, is the league chat, the active leads when news, because that's what, I hate to say it, not many of us are going to be doing this for our life, for a living here. So what it really is about is sharing a pastime, sharing a passion with someone else and having a lot of fun. And that's what that's what makes dynasty so attractive to me, is that banter, that dialogue. When our passion in the NFL happens, we can discuss it and really just compete against other people in the league that you share a lot of interest with.
Yeah, absolutely. Just enjoy it. It's a game at the end of the day, right? As well. So enjoy it and have fun. And no one's we all started this for fun. So yeah, try and keep it light whenever you can and keep it fun. I love that. And Dave, do you have any other hints and tips? Or are we going to dive right into this mock draft?
I think I'll sprinkle the rest of these hints and tips into the next segment here. So as they come up in the draft, I'll just drop some nuggets. Because sometimes it, like with some actual examples, it might go a little bit better than me just sitting on my mountaintop preaching to the masses.
Love it. So we're going to go with the landing spots. There's a lot to talk about, obviously, these guys. So we're going to go one round. We're going to go 1 to 12. We're going to see what the lay of the land looks like in the first round of a super flex rookie mock draft. So, I mean, start at the 1-1, the dream, like, I never thought Bijan Robinson's stock could have risen any further, but here we are, Dave, right? The dream landing spot, right?
I don't think there was I guess it's a pretty good landing spot, because what you have there is you've got a team that is designed to feed him volume. And I think that, I don't think it's going to be a high flying offense. So you could have landed in a really explosive offense, and that's going to be a way to manufacture volume. But I think the entire offense is going to be manufactured around Bijan, because that's what Arthur Smith really wants to be doing. So, and I don't think it's a lock. I'm seeing a lot of Bijan is not the 101 anymore. And I think across a lot of popular people. So I actually have gotten some debates recently about it, and I'm pretty firmly with Bijan. The landing spot's great and everything, but what I think here it is. Here's my first piece of advice. recency bias, and that's a term that gets thrown around a lot. But you look at the top of Superflex startups now. The early part of the draft is all quarterbacks because because what's happened is you had the CMCs and other top running backs. They got injured in their prime. They had their dominant seasons, but then CMC got hurt. They had a string of multiple seasons suffering injuries, and other running backs suffering injuries, and committees. So you were seeing a suppression of that top end fantasy asset. So people have been burned. So they're thinking like, oh, I'm going to go quarterback upside. And that's how I'm going to draft my dynasty team. And look, I'm not saying Bijan should be taking over these top players at the beginning of your Superflex startups, but everyone's like, you got to, QB is the premium position. You got to invest in it. People forget about what it is like to have a third player in your starting lineup scoring like an elite elite quarterback in Superflex. It can change your entire season. And there's definitely risk of drafting running backs or having them on your team because of their injuries and other reasons. But man, Bijan, high floor, high ceiling. He's got it all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, people can talk all they want about taking this guy or that guy number one, but Bijan just seems to be like just a slam dunk pick for me. And the way the running, I don't know if you agree here, the way the running back lay of the land is going at the minute, I wouldn't be shocked if 5 years down the line, we're actually looking at a thing kind of like what we have at tight end here, where you have this kind of elite tier at the top of running backs that aren't in a committee, because every team seems to be moving towards a committee. And then you got the rest, right? I can kind of see that coming.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we've been, to be honest. That's where it's been for running backs. So, it's, I'm not even going to say hey, you're drafting Bijan you're not going to have him on your team for the next 5 years. It's just, he's been hyped about for 3 years, and it's actually nice to have a player actually deliver on the hype and the promise. Yeah. Now, I mean, he's got to perform in the NFL, but at least he didn't get an injury in college. He didn't fall in drafts. He didn't test poorly at the combine. He didn't disappoint any 1 year in college. So it's, let's not overthink it. A 3-down workhorse running back it cannot be game scripted out of anything. It's an exciting player to have in Dynasty. And we haven't had one of those in a while here. So, at least a young one. So it's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get Bijan Robinson locked in at the 1-1 there, the new weapon over at Atlanta. And let's have a look at 1-2 then. And there's a couple of names here, right? There's no real set in stone 1-2 at the minute, I don't think. So who's your guy at 1-2?
So I thought the reason why we're not doing multiple rounds here is because I spent so much time really playing around and really testing my thoughts and sitting there and staring at some of these picks. I think the next 3 picks in your Superflex rookie drafts are incredibly difficult. And now, are you going to say make the wrong choice? No, because I think there are 3 really solid. Actually, I think there are 4. Well, let's say 3 solid options here. And so I guess that's one way to look at it. I guess you don't have to sweat it too much because there are 3 great options here. But I do think I understand why you're going to sit here and sweat it out here. And so to me, I made a last minute decision here, a half an hour before the show started. I really was, I'm going Jahmyr Gibbs at 102 over quarterbacks, over anyone, because what was really holding me back about Jahmyr Gibbs was touchdowns. I think to reach your true elite ceiling as a running back for fantasy, you have to score touchdowns. And Jahmyr Gibbs wasn't an elite touchdown scorer. Now, he still had a decent amount of touchdowns. I think his high was 8, or I can't remember off the top of my head here, 8 rushing touchdowns. But he also had I think it was 5 receiving touchdowns. So it's still overall scrimmage touchdowns was solid, but CMC and then had a lot more. And I think that was a separator. And then especially when you look at the percentage of your college offense as far as touchdowns, Jahmyr Gibbs kind of pales in comparison. But if we're going to get behind Jahmyr Gibbs as a prospect, we're going to say that he is truly one of these prospects that can be excited about because of his ability. He is an incredible receiver, probably one of the best receivers at the running back position. And then to get the draft capital, and it's not hey, here's my second piece of advice: draft capital matters, but it is not the only thing. So, or else why not just pull up the draft order and then just draft off of that? Because that's not. One, that's not very fun. And 2, your NFL teams get it wrong too. So what draft capital really is, it's a reflection, especially for running backs. It's not necessarily a reflection of skill. It's a reflection of opportunity and or perceived opportunity that the team's going to be giving him. And, they're saying that we were tempted to take him at 106. And, some of that is puff and whatever, but to get a 112 and this kind of profile at 112 into this kind of offense is exciting. The touchdowns scare me a little bit. The volume floor makes me a little nervous, but the speed, the receiving ability, and that perceived opportunity in this kind of offense with a quarterback who loves to dump it off to running backs, I'm pretty excited about Jahmyr Gibbs here. And I'm going to swing for, like, people want to talk about, hey, Anthony Richardson, his upside. If we want to swing for upside, Jahmyr Gibbs' receiving ability, and in this offense, that's what I call upside. So I'm going to have him as my 102. And I'm actually a little out of my comfort zone doing that, but I'm here on the hot seat, giving you a hot take. I wouldn't say a hot take, but I'm really pushing that idea of what upside really means. And for me, it's Jahmyr Gibbs at 102.
Yeah, absolutely. And like a big thing that maybe isn't like getting mentioned a lot is like people were saying about like Bijan Robinson, like how far is he going to slip? Is he going to slip down to like pick number 20 or something like that? And like people were like, that'd be good if he got like that kind of draft capital. It's like Jahmyr Gibbs got better draft capital than what we thought Bijan Robinson might have got. Like, so that's got to be a huge like tick for Jahmyr Gibbs. And I just think, yeah, if everything goes to plan, the only thing I'm kind of worried about is like DeAndre Swift, right? Obviously, similar-ish player, maybe not as fast, but good receiving back. If things didn't work out for him there, are you like a bit nervous then for Jahmyr Gibbs?
Hey, the thing with love is once you get burned once, you gotta get back on the horse and do it all over again, right? No. But in all seriousness, though, the question is legitimate, and that is part of my thought process. Was like, hey, I really like DeAndre Swift. He's my highest, like out of there's Breece Hall's my number one as far as these blue chip pieces are concerned, and then it's DeAndre Swift at 33% rostership. So, yeah, I've felt the pain of DeAndre Swift, but so has the Lions organization, who has not been happy with him, but then they are ready to go they're a significant more draft capital invested in Jahmyr Gibbs than DeAndre Swift, especially with the amount of running backs available to, like, we were talking about the amount of volume as far as running backs are concerned. So that should decrease the supply or the demand. And they still did it. And I'm just like, you know what? I gotta follow what I care about. And yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, DeAndre Swift, as good as he is not what DeAndre Swift, what he is as a receiver. He's not the same level as receiver as Jahmyr Gibbs is. Agreed. Because he doesn't have quite the speed either.
Yeah, no, agreed, definitely. So that's Jahmyr Gibbs locked in at 102. Who's following him up at the third pick of the first round?
So I'm going to get a little bit more chalky here, and I'm going to go. This is when I think I am really struggling with the next two picks, because they don't really separate a lot for me, but I'm going to just get it out of the way. My 103 is Bryce Young. He was a 101 to Carolina.
Yep.
And before the draft, I probably would have said I was comfortable taking JSN as my 102 because I really loved him. And then, but here I'm going Bryce Young at the 103. And he, the way I approach quarterbacks, the main inputs that I care about are experience, efficiency and accuracy, and then rushing ability. That's kind of how and age too. So those five things are the main pillars or the main tenets of my QB philosophy. It's after Jim Sonis, the number fire analyst who's really good at evaluating quarterbacks. I really took a lot of what he does for quarterback evaluation. And Young, he has the experience. He's a young. It sounds weird to say Young is a young quarterback, but he's not an older quarterback. He's not the youngest quarterback ever to come out or anything. He's like that, but he's a decent, good age, experience, very efficient quarterback, and he's an accurate passer. The only problem, the really ding, is the size and the rushing production. Really, I think that hurts his ceiling, and that's, to be honest, the ceiling of these quarterbacks is what kind of made Jahmyr Gibbs push up to 102 for me. So Gibbs is, Young, while I think he's ultimately like in the best, like the most likely outcome for me is he's going to be a high-end QB1 or high-end QB2 or low-end QB1 for Superflex purposes. And that's why I bumped him down to 103, is that you're lacking the upside, you're lacking the pizzazz. and also too, sometimes you get these quarterbacks who struggle early on, and while they still maintain a decent value, running backs have consistently shown that, hey, when they hit, they really pay off on that ROI. That kind of factor into it here. But the real tiebreaker for me, though, between my next pick and in CJ Stroud and Bryce Young is the decision-making ability for Bryce Young and his ability to handle pressure. Or I mean, that's what everyone raves about, is Bryce Young's ability to, when things collapse, and his ability off of script. He operates very well on script and in timing, but when it breaks down, he can handle it. He keeps his eyes upfield, and he still hits people, makes incredible throws. And that's kind of what does it for me. Whereas CJ Stroud, I really didn't like his, so I'm going to just go right into 104 here. CJ Stroud, he was also decent age, good experience, was efficient and accurate passer, which I really, and actually he's much more efficient and accurate than Young. And there's like this rumor, there's this perceived rumor. You always hear people whisper about it. CJ Stroud might have some rushing ability. He had like his first touch or his first game ever as a starter. He won a rush for 48 yards for a touchdown. So there is that possibility that could develop. But that being said, CJ Stroud, but the real negatives for him are that he struggles with pressure. It's really clunky when things break down, because he had an amazing offensive line here, and the competition, the Big Ten, while still very good, is not what it is in the SEC. So his competition, his O-line play, and also too, just his wide receiver talents were just far and away better than Bryce Young's. So that's kind of, and then also too, the real knock was, I really kind of was deflated when Houston traded up for the 103 and they gave up their 24 first. I just think to me, I'm perceiving some organizational incompetence, and I think it's tough to measure what that means. So when you're trying to look from an analytical point of view, how do you measure that? So this is more of a gut thing that, says I can hear the shower or something going on in the background here. Sorry if you picked that up, but I really can, just thinking here. So I really think that perceived ability to the organization. So, all right, I'm going to just roll it back really quick there. So I got a little off track there.
Okay.
The organization can really affect how a quarterback either thrives or struggles. And I think Trevor Lawrence, I know this is recency bias, but I think it was a perfect example of, hey, one of the best prospects we've seen from the QB position struggled as a rookie because of the organization around him. You put someone just who's competent as a coach, and he's starting, and then gives him some decent weapons around him, and you're seeing him thrive. So I think that is what was really the tiebreaker here. But that is not me hating on CJ Stroud, because I spent a lot on his negatives here, but his efficiency, his ability to throw the ball all levels of the field is excellent. Lots of love for CJ Stroud as well.
Yeah, I think that's what I was kind of torn on it too. And the last show we had just before the draft, I ended up just saying, like, you know what? I think I'll just take the guy that goes to the Panthers. Like, because the Texans, you're right, they've been a bit of a dumpster fire for a while, and I know they've kind of strengthened that offensive line, but the weapons that Stroud has, I mean, throwing to Robert Woods is not the same as throwing to Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, as good as Robert Woods has been, and like whatever, it's not the same. So I think whoever went to the Texans is probably going to struggle a little bit more than whoever went to the Panthers. So yeah, I think you're right here, taking Bryce Young above CJ Stroud.
And don't get me wrong, Bryce Young had some amazing talent around him as well. But if we're just comparing the two, I think Bryce Young did more with less. So, so that's just as a separator here. And then this conversation that you just brought up here, that as far as landing spot, you said, hey, I'm going to take whoever the Panthers take because of the Houston. Kind of remind me of another piece of advice to kind of sprinkle in here. Our overconfidence as analysts or fantasy managers, or however you want to frame it, is we think we know more than we actually do. So if you look at where our rankings were from in year N+2, so what our rank is going to be from now compared to what it's going to look like in 2 years, it is disgusting. Like you look back at your rankings, like, what was I thinking? That player sucks, or what have you. And so I think, like, hey, and that happens a lot with landing spot, and that's why I really try not to overweight landing spot too much. And it's really just a tiebreaker for me, is that It's really hard to measure a landing spot. How do you objectively measure it without having my own bias and other things play into it? And things change so rapidly. Like people are talking about Trevor Lawrence, and hey, they were talking about how the brilliance of, I can't remember, Urban Meyer when he was being drafted, and like, oh, this coaching mind, he came to Jacksonville because of Trevor Lawrence, and it's going to be great for him. He knows how to use him. And look how that happened. And then look at how Tom Brady's situation changed from, he had one of the best lines, and then a year later, because of injuries, things are not going great anymore. So it's just how much things can change, or overconfidence. So, and when you're valuing your rookies, and things are changing because of landing spot and draft capital, just remember, we do not know as much as we think we know. So try to go back to things that are predictive, not descriptive, as far as predicting the future.
Yeah. One of the most interesting things I noticed is I've kind of been gathering sort of industry ADP over the last couple of months. And one of the things I did was kind of collaborate like weeks worth of ADP and like gathering it, and then took an average of it. I was using an Excel spreadsheet, Dave. You'd be very proud of me.
And I'm getting a little flush. You talking about Excel?
Yeah. It worked out an average and everything. Had like a little, it was beautiful. But the guy that rounded out as before the combine as the number 10 sort of rookie in terms of ADP was Sean Tucker. And this is a guy did he go undrafted?
Unfortunately, yeah. And we didn't know about the heart condition until like a week ago?
Yeah.
So it's too bad,
And that's just like, you're talking about how things can change in 2 years. This thing is due to 2 months, right? Completely. Like, I don't think we're going to hear Sean Tucker's name in the first round of this draft, but he was locked in at number 10.
So one of I made a trade for Deshaun Watson 2 days before all of the news about all of his things happened, and it just tanked my entire fantasy season for one league. And it just shows you just don't like, you never know what's going to happen in the NFL. So you got to it's all about risk management. And one of the biggest problems of measuring risk is you have to have an unknown quotient or part of your risk analysis. There's just some unknown that you have to play in there. It can be unknown for the better or for the worse.
Yeah, exactly. So we gotta be careful with these picks, and I'm sure whoever's coming in at 1-5 will have their unknown qualities as well. So who we taking?
So this is probably there's probably some people screaming at this, like, this Dave Wright, he's an idiot. Like, go back to your spreadsheets, go, touch some grass, watch some film. Really, what the heck are you doing here? There's this guy with the highest upside in the entire class. You haven't even really talked about him yet. And guess what? I'm not going to take him here either, because what I'm going to go right here next is Jackson Smith-Njigba. He went 120 in the NFL draft to Seattle. And something that's being really talked about with Seattle right now, and this isn't really advice here, but it's like a little aside here. Seattle is showing us something. They're really showing us something with their draft on day 1 and day 2. And they really are investing in the offense. I think they're trying to tell us they do not want to be the same old boring Seattle Seahawks that were grind and pound and win with defense, because they have a lot of holes on defense, and they addressed it later in the draft and blah, blah, blah. But what I'm trying to get at is when you're investing in Jackson Smith-Njigba in the first round, when you already have a lot invested in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, that's telling me that you want to upgrade your offense. And then you have what people consider one of the best young running backs in the league. And then you spend a premium draft pick on Zach Charbonnet. That's telling me that they want to become more offensive. And I think a big mistake people take is that they take last year's advice or what happened last year in the NFL, and they apply it to going forward as if that was predictive, when, like I said earlier, it was descriptive. And just think back. And so now, but that being said, I'm going to put a big butt back here, and I'm going to do it myself here because, we're on the hot seat and we're having fun. But the Philadelphia Eagles, they were telling us by going out and signing or trading a first and signing AJ Brown to a big deal that they wanted to get better on offense. They wanted to invest in a passing, and what happened? They took a big step forward. So what happens, roll back, and now people are just overlooking. They're looking at, Jackson Smith-Njigba going to Seattle. That's bad news. And, look, it's not great. He did definitely, let me rephrase it. It's not as good as it could have been. And then, Charbonnet goes to Seattle as well. That's disappointing. I got Charbonnet yesterday in a draft at 206 because of this. So at 206 in a super flex draft with a lot of sharp people in it, I got him at 206.
Wow.
And I think it's because, you know what? Seattle has been a laughing stock for a long time because people think of them as a slow paced offense that just want to, they never let Russell Wilson cook and all of these different things. Actually, Seattle was like a top 10 defense in pace and pass attempts last year. And I think over the last 2 years, they've been one of the more their pace of play and their pass attempts per game have been up there. So not only are they showing this with their play calling and their overall offensive philosophy, but now they're investing draft capital and contracts into it as well. You know, what they're signing DK Metcalf and what they've given to Tyler Lockett. Yeah, I guess maybe that we should just think that, hey, they want to be better on offense, and why not invest in players on what could become one of the more mispriced offenses in the league, and it could be one, easily being a top 10 offense next year.
Yeah, I don't see why not. They've got like absolute slam dunk players all over on that offense now. Like, I mean, Geno Smith, while people might still have questions about Geno Smith, he was perfectly serviceable last year. Like, that's not a guy that you're going to be really worried about, I don't think. And then you've added Jackson Smith and Jigba to an already super strong wide receiver room. And oh, by the way, you've got two of the best young running backs in the league to kind of back that up now. Love it, right? They're definitely going places.
Yeah. So look, the competition, the target competition, is going to hurt probably JSN initially. Don't get me wrong here, but a piece of advice that you hear a lot is, bet on talent. Talent rises to the top. And that's what I believe in Jackson Smith-Njigba's talent. He had an incredible year back in 2021. I think it was 2021 when he led Ohio State. Some incredible players. He led all their wide receivers there. And he's just, people want to knock his athleticism. He actually tested just fine. He tested very well. He actually, and they want people like, oh, you should adjust because it was a pro, or they actually didn't have to, it was the combine. Never mind. He ran just fine. And I think while he's not going to just be this amazing player on the outside, and if he ever plays from the outside, he might not be a starter and 2 wide receiver sets and blah, 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 blah. JSN's good. He's really good. And I'm just a bet on the talent. And yeah, so that's what I really was kind of disappointed that I couldn't put my flag in him a little earlier and go, yeah, I want JSN at 102 or 103 because that's how much I like him as a talent. But because of, the initial landing spot and some of the other, just the way it's going to play out is that I can't be quite as high, and it can be tempered. You got to still maintain your process a little bit.
I also think that I think he's better than Tyler Lockett, right? And I'd even go to say he's better than DK Metcalf too. Like I wouldn't be too shocked if he ends up actually just by being Jackson Smith and Jigba, just ends up, Geno Smith falling in love with him and ends up being the guy on that team. Actually, I think he's that good. That might be a bit too hot take.
Hashtag certified inferno. It is the rubber stamp it right there, baby. Look, that is in the range of outcomes. I think he's that good of a talent. Now, will that happen because I think DK Metcalf is really good, and I think Tyler Lockett is consistently undervalued. Yeah. But his contract situation is who knows what he's going to be around here. But the point being is, I think Jackson Smith-Njigba still has a lot of paths to success, and I'm going to bet on him. Look, I really like him as a player, and now I'm just rambling because I'm falling in love with him. My eyes are getting glossy, and I'm just starting to think about if you want more of my thoughts about, there's a free article over at DLF for my Jackson Smith-Njigba, over 1,000 words on his college production, his film, and what I think his value is prior to the pre-draft, and all that is rinse and repeat, and I still believe in that right now.
Nice. So definitely go check that out over on DLF. So we got Jackson Smith-Njigba locked up there. So who's following him at pick 16?
I think this is where I could be convinced to take Anthony Richardson because for all the reasons that everyone's been screaming at the TV for, or however they're consuming this podcast or YouTube video. But I'm not going to do that because I believe in Jordan Addison as he fell to Minnesota. Talk about great landing spot. I really like Kirk Cousins as a fantasy quarterback as far as facilitating to what he's done for Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson over the years. And I think the knocks about his size and his ability in press coverage, they say that that's a pretty common criticism for people of his size. And while it might be warranted, I think what is more important is his age-adjusted production in college as the best college wide receiver when he was at Pitt and then transferring. While he didn't meet the same expectations that he had with a better quarterback, At USC, he still produced well. He did deal with some injuries, and I just think Jordan Addison really fits what they're trying to do in Minnesota very well. And I think it might not have the ceiling here, but sometimes when I'm at the 106, as I'm not always just swinging for ceiling all the time. And I think, all right. So here's another piece of advice. So I have all this advice now because that not that anyone's listening now that I haven't taken their favorite player yet, but wide receiver depth in fantasy is an overstatement. I think that is not true. Like if you're playing in a league where you start 3 and there's like one or two flexes, which is more and more common nowadays, wide receivers dry up really quick. It might feel like there's 40 wide receivers that you're comfortable with, but when it comes down to the end of the season, like because of injuries and the way it shakes out at the end of the season, there's only the wide receiver becomes a little scarce. The same with running back. But the thing is, when a running back goes down, you can pick a guy up off the waiver wire, or your third, you have all these players stashed in your bench. You can't just have when a wide receiver goes down, your replacement does not perform the same way it does like in the running back position.
Yeah.
So I think the perceived depth at wide receiver is not true. And so I like to stockpile my wide receivers, even if they might be they might not be as hot and sexy as running backs or quarterbacks in Superflex.
That is a really, really good point, actually, right? Whenever, like, say your star receiver goes down, and say Jamar Chase goes down, and the Bengals have to bring in that guy that looked like Hayden Hurst. What's he called? The small guy that looks like like a mini Hayden Hurst, who was like Irwin. Was it Irwin?
Oh, Trent Irwin. Yeah, Trent Irwin.
Yeah, right. It's not like Chase came out and Irwin is now playing. It's not like Irwin's getting all those targets. No, they're just going to T. Higgins. Like, that's not how it works. Whereas the running back comes out, there's only one guy that comes in. He's getting all the runs. He's getting all the extra targets. So yeah, you're right. It doesn't quite work the same way as running back. So get as many of these receivers as you can.
And sometimes too, you do get committees who fill in for these star running backs, but more often than not, you're going to be able to get at least some floor value with a replacement level running back versus a replacement level wide receiver.
Yeah, absolutely agree. So yeah, love the pick of Jordan Addison, and yeah, absolutely perfect line. So I can't wait to see what him and Justin Jefferson do. So who's coming at 1-7? The scream. Do you think? Can you hear the screams getting louder? People just screaming Anthony. I can hear it. Dave, are you going to relent? Are you going to say no? I will not yield. I'm
going to just give everyone a little some foreshadowing. Anthony Richardson is not in my first. No, he's 107. He's the 107 here. And look, there are some people who are going to out there and they're going to make fun of people for drafting Addison or drafting Anthony Richardson because he's, there's some people who label themselves as analytical people who approach things through numbers and advanced metrics, and they're going to make fun of people who like Anthony Richardson. And that's not necessarily what I'm not like, I understand why people want to like Anthony Richardson. I really do. He's at the athleticism, the rushing upside. It's that perceived ceiling is exciting. And I do generally agree that you want to shoot for upside. That's what really separates fantasy players and those blue chip assets are what win championships. Like, I understand a lot of the philosophy around Anthony Richardson. However, that being said, I just don't think he's a very good quarterback. And I'm sorry. And the way I evaluate quarterbacks now, I will I missed Josh Allen. I missed it bad. I'm sorry, but I generally, and I actually really I liked Jalen Hurts. I thought he was undervalued, but the problem was he was undervalued and going the mid-second round. Anthony Richardson is going at 101 in some places, at 102, 103, 104. And that's the difference, is that I could get Jalen Hurts, who wasn't as accurate as I would like in the mid-second round. Now I don't want to pay that premium, especially what we had, especially what the price for 2023 picks was over the last 2 years. They were astronomical, really hard to acquire. And I bought into some of that. And I do not want to play what I had to get to acquire some of these picks, or what I had to hold, like the offers I had to reject because of this perceived class. I don't want to invest in that in a player who I think is a 30th percentile type passer. Just those type of players don't usually succeed in the NFL. Now, I have a big philosophy in that what you do in college is generally what you do in the NFL. Is that I don't think a lot of times you don't just become better at something in the NFL. Like, yeah, I do believe like people develop and stuff. I just don't want to bet on that, especially when it's baked into the price. It's nice when like CJ Stroud is like, hey, maybe he could run a little more, and that's a bonus. That's how he hits a little bit more upside than you're expecting. That's exciting. But when it's baked in and people are saying he's the QB1 in this class, I can't get behind it because and this is actually just a side note here. He is not the most athletic quarterback ever. Hate to break it to you guys. Cam Newton as a prospect would eat Anthony Richardson's lunch. Yeah, he tests better in underwear Olympics, but if you looked at what Cam Newton did on the field against SEC players, he bowled them over. He passed. He had over a 10 average adjusted yards per attempt in college in the SEC at Auburn. And he basically got Kelvin Benjamin drafted in the first round. Anthony Richardson to get any wide receivers drafted in the first round. He didn't, and he tasked a little faster. But you look at Cam Newton's agility ratings and what he did in the athleticism measurables or the agility measurables.
Yeah,
he blew that out of the water. Why didn't Anthony Richardson do any of his agility drills? Maybe he didn't have to. Maybe he didn't have to. He could be wicked at agile. I don't know. But what I'm just saying is that I think people are like, get out of here. Cam Newton was a dog. He was a dog, and people remember what he was like the last couple of years in New England. But man, what he did as a prospect at Auburn, and then and I actually made a mistake. I don't think Cam Newton did. I think that was Jameer. I'm getting my players mixed up here, but I got on a tangent here. But yeah, anyway, that being said, enough Anthony Richardson shade here. I do really understand why people like him and why they want to draft him. I'm just not. This is a risk management type thing for me. If I'm investing that kind of capital in there, I don't want to bake in a player developing as a passer when he had and the inexperience gets me as well. Like, I really care about efficiency and accuracy. Anthony Richardson was not, and I understand that he didn't have a lot of weapons. That being said, the inexperience and his passing profile really concern me. But at 107, I think that's a lot more, especially with how this class ended up going in the NFL draft and how it wasn't get the love that we thought it was going to get. 107 is so much more palatable than up higher. So I could be wrong. I could really hurt my fantasy teams, could really hurt the people who followed my advice, could really hurt from this. But this is just about risk management. And I'd rather take the risk on Jahmyr Gibbs, on Jackson Jigba than I would than an Anthony Richardson.
It's so fascinating because even like you mentioned CJ Stroud and like you're like, oh, could he have the rushing upside? At least there's like some historical data where you look at that Ohio State system and someone like a Justin Fields who had the same question marks about him, like, can he run the ball? We don't know. He kind of stared down his receivers and he was a pocket guy, and then look at him now, right? The second he's allowed off that leash, he's like this dynamic runner. Could CJ Stroud have the same thing once that Ohio State leash has kind of been taken off him? Maybe. But I don't know. You might know more than me about this, Dave, but I doubt there's much historical data for, a 30th percentile passer making it big in the NFL.
It basically is you got Josh Allen, and then not a lot out. I think Jalen Hurts was way ahead of Anthony Richardson as a passer. Now what you just brought up, thank you for bringing this up. I think there's some cognitive dissonance being brought up here. People are like, oh, well, these things could develop for Anthony Richardson because that ceiling is there. If those things develop, that ceiling is sky high. Well, so people are saying that things could develop for Anthony Richardson. Well, what if things develop for Bryce Young? What if things develop for CJ Stroud? Like if we're going to play this, hey, what if game with Anthony Richardson, why can't we play this what if game with other players too? So I think right. I think that's just not, I just think you're not being intellectually honest if you're going to play that game. So that's kind of what. Now, that being said, I still respect, I'm not going to poo-poo the idea because I do understand why people like Anthony Richardson. I want to make sure, I'm not going to tons of respect for those people and everything, but it comes down to brass tacks for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got Richardson locked in. So who's following him up then at pick 1-8 in the first?
Cardinal sin on the hot seat here by myself, as I did not ask how long you wanted this podcast to go. So I hope I'm not taking too long here.
As long as you need, it's fine. No time limits here.
So I think personally, I'm cool with just checking out after the 106 in my rookie draft. Like before the draft, I made a trade. I traded the 110, the 111 for the 104, and I'm so thankful for that. Like I'm very like that happened. I know people are saying this is deep class. There's a lot of good depth here. I'm like, I'm cool with just stopping at 106, like investing all my chips, getting those 6 players, then being done, and then just throwing some darts in the second and mid third in the third round. But that being said, here I'm going Zay Flowers, who went to Baltimore at 122, really gives another weapon for Lamar Jackson, and you know they've new offensive coordinator.
Yeah,
you're hoping for a healthy Rashad Bateman and then Mark Andrews. So you can start to see, and then you have the running back there from Ohio State who is who's escaping me right now.
J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah, J.K. Dobbins. So you really can start to paint a picture where they're starting to give a little bit more weapons to Lamar Jackson. So maybe they can go back to some more friendlier pass attempt volume. Now I'm not predicting a major spike in pass attempts or anything like that. All I'm saying is it's Zay Flowers, who's a very exciting player. I think his college production is sometimes a little overstated in a weak Boston College type offense. That being said, I think he's an exciting player, and at 108, I am really cool with tapping in to Zay Flowers, and I don't think there's a lot to discuss with Zay Flowers, and that I think he's a solid pick at 108.
Yeah, and it's kind of what you said about Jahmyr Gibbs, right? With these Ravens pass catchers, like the thing with love is like you get burned and you gotta jump right back up and hope for the best. But you're right, the new coaching scheme there, like signing Odell Beckham Jr., you don't sign him just to run the ball.
Yeah, I even forgot OBJ. Like, you're right.
Yeah, they're obviously a slight changing of the guard as to what's happening here. So hopefully Zay Flowers can be a benefactor of that. So I think he's great value at that pick. And you kind of mentioned there, like just one quick question about, you said like to about 1-6. So is this kind of the land here about 1-8, 1-9, where you're happy just to take a random 24 first and just hit it next year?
I'd want a little bit more than a 24 first. So give me give me a late second and 24 first. Sure. But I'm not just like cashing out for a 20, and I'm not sure who makes that deal with a second involved. But I think it's just more, I think the teams, because I have actually plenty of Superflex later half picks. And I don't think that while I think their value has decreased a little bit, I'm no longer as excited for them. And I just don't think, while they could have, I think there's definitely upside there. And I'm not just giving them away for pennies. I'm just no longer counting on them, especially in year one, to really help me compete moving forward. So I'm definitely looking to trade them for veterans, for 24 firsts. If I'm rebuilding, like, or if I'm retooling, I'd consider definitely trading for that 24 first more so. But yeah, I think that wraps that question up. But that's a good question.
Yeah. So let's, after Zay Flowers, we got pick 1-9. So who's going to be following Zay Flowers?
So it's Zach Charbonnet for me. I've kind of been a little bit of a hater is a strong word for Kenneth Walker. I think he's a very good running back. I just think he's a little overrated. I think his success rate, it speaks a little bit of my feelings. I think he's a little bit of a home run or bust type runner. And I think he just had the perfect scenario for him last year, a quarterback that exceeded expectations. His competition was minimal at the running back position. And so it was best case scenario. And now I think adding Zach Charbonnet, I don't think he's a player that like, oh, Zach Charbonnet's brought in and that's like, oh man, that just oh man, Kenneth Walker's dust. Like the uber impressive prospect that is Zach Charbonnet. But what he is he can play on all 3 downs. He's a very good pass catcher. And I think he is at least, I think he can very easily handle 40% of the opportunities in Seattle's backfield. And I think that's how Seattle wants to play it as well.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, when it first happened, my initial reaction was like, oh my God, this is like terrible. But actually, as you think about it a bit more, you're like, right, okay. Is Kenneth Walker actually this kind of bell cow running back, or was Kenneth Walker in a backfield where everybody else was injured and he just happens to have that role? And actually, Pete Carroll is now going to, like you said, make it more of like a 60-40 split with these two, possibly. I don't think Walker is that locked in bell cow.
Yeah, and like don't get me wrong, like there's a lot of excitement with Kenneth Walker. I don't want to like poo-poo a lot of people's one of their favorite running backs, a young running back. But he's not a he's not a natural pass catcher. Now I think he can show more than some people said originally, but I don't think he's a natural pass catcher. I think Zach Charbonnet is a better pass catcher, and he does better with the ball in his hands out of the backfield. Now, I will say I want to rinse and repeat what I said about when I was talking about JSN and the Seattle's offense. Now, the idea too is like I'm baking into, hey, what happens when Seattle is like what if their offense takes a big step forward because of what they're investing into these offensive skill position players, and there's just more high value touches to go around. I think that's what we're also is baked into this at 109, because I think that, and then also too, what happens if you never want to bank on injuries, and what happens if Kenneth Walker, who dealt with some injuries at times as a rookie, what happens when Kenneth Walker goes down and you get at the 109 and you have a player who's proven on 3 downs and has the college production to back it up that people had as their locked in RB3. And because they fall behind Kenneth Walker, he's now the RB6, RB7 for them. And look, I'm not poo-pooing that process. They make a lot of good points, but for me, I just want to, I'm pushing in some chips on Seattle's offense, taking a step forward.
Yeah. I think that's a really good decision. And I love, do you see you got him a 2.6 in a draft?
Yeah, I got 206. And I had the 211 and I only had to trade the 306 to go up to 206 to go get him.
Wow. So that is a slam dunk deal for you there. So yeah, even pretty good value at like 1.9. You get him a 2.6. That's got to be like one of those things you'll look back on in a few years like, I got Zach Charbonnet at 2.6. And you'd be like, yeah, I still remember that. You talk about like, tell the grandkids about it.
And then like someone could is going to in 2 years from now play this clip of me bragging about getting Zach Charbonnet at 206, and like, you're an idiot because he Kenneth Walker dominated. So it's like, it's just, it could be one or the other.
We'll edit that out next year. Don't worry, I'll go back and cut it out if it's a flop. So we're up at 110 then. So who we going to be clipping in? You're going to be like, I got this guy at 110 next year.
So what I was really excited is I felt kind of like on an island at times with a lot of people that I talk about with QB or running back evaluation with, because I had Kendre Miller as a better prospect than Zach Evans. And I think, and I understand like a lot of people thought that way, but like some people that I really, really like I really can like to check myself and just see what they're thinking. They were like, yeah, no, Zach Evans, like blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, I really think Kendre Miller's the RB4 here. I don't think, his lack, he doesn't have necessarily the pass catching ability. And he only had that one season where he really exploded. And even then he didn't handle a huge workload in that one season at TCU, but his efficiency as a running back efficiency is what it is, but it is somewhat, you can use it a little bit in your process here, but he has a good touch threshold. He scores touchdowns, and then he lands in New Orleans, who, I think at time, like I was on a stream when this pick happened and people were gotten really excited about Kendre Miller. He's the RB3, yada, yada, yada. And I was like, yeah, but then we also remember Jamal Williams is there now too, who stole a lot of touchdowns. And then Alvin Kamara, who, a lot of people are now thinking that maybe this court case might get pushed back a whole nother year. So the NFL has to hold up. So I don't want to just say, hey, there's tons of opportunity there, but he got the draft capital, and I think he's the youngest running back that was drafted, if I'm not mistaken. And I really like the way he runs. And some people criticize him as a little bit upright type of guy. I mean, when I run is like, I think he can make people miss. He has the speed. I know he didn't test, but I think he has the speed to hit the big play, which really helps hit your fantasy ceilings when you can turn the 40-yard gain into a 70-yard gain and a touchdown. And I think that's what Kendre Miller is. And especially in New Orleans, who have been known to use Alvin Kamara they do not want to use him as an 80% opportunity share guy. Kendre Miller has a lot of promise in New Orleans.
Yeah, I was in the same boat as you with Kendre Miller versus Zach Evans. My whole thing, I tried to keep it simple. I was like, right, they're both in the same team, and Zach Evans couldn't really, fully beat out Kendre Miller, so he left, went to Ole Miss, and then he couldn't beat out a true freshman. And when Zach Evans left, TCU then go to like a championship game without Zach Evans. So it's kind of like, what am I was kind of the same as you. I was like, what am I missing here? Like, why so people so high on this guy? I'm not saying that Zach Evans is like a bad a bad prospect or anything like that, but I never got why he was taking over some of these other guys.
There was a lot of speculation too about his recruitment process. He was non-committal. He changed his mind a bunch. And I think now people are a little bit more open to that because of the transfer portal now and how that works. But I still think some of that and his non-committalness and then transferring again once he actually got to college, I think that kind of plays into it a little bit with the whispers around Zach Evans. I think Zach Evans is a very efficient running back. Now, the only thing I really liked the size. I think Kendrick Miller's size. I haven't really talked about yet what I like in a running back too. What I like in a running back is their size. As someone who's taking Jahmyr Gibbs at 102 at 199 pounds. But I deal like this is usually in my process. I like someone who at least gets over 20 combined or 20 touches and averages over 20 touches per game in a season, is over 210 pounds and can catch the ball as well. Kendrick Miller, now he didn't necessarily meet the touch threshold because of having Zach Evans there, and then just and it didn't quite hit that touch threshold I like to see. He did have the size and the speed though for me, so that's why he falls here to me, because just the way I approach the running back position.
Love it. So let's get Kendrick Miller locked in at 110. We got 2 picks left then, Dave. Who's your penultimate guy in this first round?
So this is my pronunciation. I should know now because you watch the draft and I've been on some shows now where I've talked about him, but I don't know. Devin Achane, I think is how it's pronounced.
I've heard Achane, I've heard Achane, I've heard a lot. Well, it reminds me of last people. You watched that show, The Boys, the Amazon show, The Boys. Yep. Like Atrian, I'm like Achian. I kind of like, and they're both like really fast. So I'm like, okay, I'll roll with that.
Yeah. So I like that. So, and what's really weird to me about this whole process for this class is that, like I said, that process where I like my bigger running backs who have this touch threshold, who can also catch passes. That's how I usually approach running back position. But this was a different class. This was just a totally different class where, you had some COVID stuff going on. So some players were a little bit older too, as because of the COVID rules and how many games were played, like seasons were messed up. And so there's just a lot. This is just we're entering a little bit more of a unique too. And also college football is changing a lot as how the running backs are being treated. So there's just a lot of new things that are happening in college football. So you have to take that into account when you're approaching these players. And that's what I really tried to be open and think critically when I was talking about Jahmyr Gibbs and my evaluating him. And I did the same thing to Ajay. Usually I would have just laughed at people and saying, you told me 188 pounds or whatever he was. And that's what, bulked up for him is bulked up 188 and blah, blah, blah. And, and laugh them out of the park. It's like, that's just someone I'm not going to, because I really want to invest in that volume floor. That's what I'm looking for, is that volume floor and running backs. And then Ajay, when you think of a smaller player, usually those type of players are more shifty. They can move side to side. They make guys miss. I think Tariq Cohen, the joystick type thing. You don't necessarily see that with Achane. He's more of just a get and go guy who's just going to beat with pure speed. Actually, it's kind of refreshing. You don't see that running style very often. It's someone who's just I'm going to beat you, and you have to account for my speed, and that's going to give me big chunk plays. But I also can run in between the tackles decently, despite my size. And while he still did pass or had a lot of catches, I don't think he was he's not the type of, you think, a small running back, well, they're going to go out in the slot and run all these really crisp route runner and have a better ADOT. Now, that necessarily wasn't the case with Achane. But that being said, he still has the ability to at least functionally use his hands to catch the football. And then I think the big thing, first off, pat me on the back because I haven't mentioned landing spot with him yet, because that's what I think usually what everyone's going to say first. But then we throw in landing spot in Miami and how they like to use their speed at the running back position. And if that offense hits like it did when Tua was really firing last season, there's a lot of upside here. So like I said, while I'm poo-pooing a little bit the second half of this first round, there is still some upside here, and it's some excitement here at that, with that possibility. And I think some people have Achane as their RB3. So I think that's what you're seeing a lot because of the landing spot. They're pushing with their RB3. I still think who's the running back there? I know there's
Mostert.
Raheem
Raheem Mostert's
Mostert
there. Jeff Wilson
and
is
Jeff
there,
Wilson.
right?
Yeah, Jeffrey Wilson. I still think Jeffrey Wilson's going to get a lot of work as handling a
Yeah.
lot of the non-sexy touches, but as a high value touch guy, it'd be exciting to see. Now, I don't think Achane's really a goal line guy because of his size, but to get him some high value touches could be exciting here. So there's a lot of stories or narratives that you can paint yourself to how he can succeed. Now, there's also ways that you can to see where he's getting 4 or 5 touches a game, and he's got to break the big play to really matter for your fantasy team. So I think it's a high volatile pick, but the upside is there, and I think that's why I'm comfortable taking here at 111.
I just can't wait to see, because there will be a point at some stage, and I'd love to hear the opposition coach mic'd up for this, but the Dolphins at one stage will have Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert like lined up behind Tua with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle like on either side, and they're just going to be like, what are we going to, like, someone's going to get the ball here that's faster than everyone else on this field. Like, what are we going to do? I can't wait to see like how they're going to get around that and the mechanics of that.
Yeah, it's exciting. Like, this is what you want to see. This is what makes fantasy fun, is that, and I think he's a fun player to invest in. And I really, I like the speed is fun. Speed is something that I do not have. And so when I do see it, it is fun to watch.
yeah, absolutely. I'm in the same boat as you, Dave, there. Absolutely. So we're going to head up the last pick then of the first round with 112. So who's rounding out the first round for you?
And it's Quentin Johnson. And I think there's a lot of negatives been talked about him and his ability to handle that he doesn't look like, for someone who was, originally in the process, there people think he was like 6'4". He wasn't quite the size that people thought he was. And then he doesn't necessarily play to that size all the time. And then some people complain about, he doesn't he doesn't have the extensive route tree. And look, I hear all the negatives, and I know, to be honest, his production isn't the sexiest in the world, but there's a lot of positives. I think, negatives can often stick out more than positives. That being said, he still did have some decent production at TCU. And this is one of those things where you say, if he does develop certain things where if he does extend the route tree, and he does work on a little bit more being more aggressive at the catch point and not body catching as much, that you can see some develop. And the thing is too, that we haven't even talked about, is the one he lands with a quarterback in Justin Herbert. That's very exciting. And then you're getting some older players there, and Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. And there's one of those things where there's a lot of ways to point this as something to be excited about. And guess what? Touchdowns really matter. And someone with that size and where it seems like there's been a lot of smaller wide receivers to come out that have hit over the last couple seasons. It's kind of nice to see someone with a little bit different type of playing style. And I think that at 112, he's a lot more. I love taking at 112 than where he was back in February and January, and people were talking about it as the 106, 107. I think the 112 is much more palatable now because of his landing spot at, attached to Justin Herbert and getting the draft capital. You might not get Quentin Johnson at 112, and that's how the cookie crumbles here. But I think there are going to be some spots where people who still have some question marks with Quentin Johnson. And I think that's this point where I want to take the risk on Quentin Johnson.
Yeah, I think that is about right for him. That, like, obviously being paired up with Justin Herbert is amazing. I still have a few question marks about like how well coached that Chargers team is. I wonder if they're the actual team that will bring him on and develop him. Like, he's got a lot of gaps there, but I think they have a new offensive coordinator this year. Hopefully can plug in some gaps and try and fix some of the flaws that he's got. But talent is there. But yeah, you gotta hope that he develops. But at 112, that's usually what you're picking at 112 anyway, isn't it? A guy that's got some pretty obvious flaws, but you're like, let's see what happens here.
And what happens a lot of times is that's when people who are good at risk management, who are in their fantasy leagues, who have done very well in 110, 111, 112. They were in the playoffs. They were in that hunt for that trophy. They make a lot of smart moves, and then they have players fall into their lap because they have some question marks, but then the upside is still there. And they take that as a little depth piece. And then if it hits, boom. But then, you still say if he doesn't hit and you want to trade him and you still got that. Well, he's still a first round player. He's still attached to Justin Herbert. He's still going to have some value where you can recoup a second round pick maybe in the future, those kind of things. So that's some risk management there. There's a lot of reasons why the rich sometimes get richer.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's zoom out here and have a look. Then this is the first round. We end up with Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jordan Addison, Anthony Richardson, Zay Flowers, and then a little running back run of Charbonnet, Miller, Devon Achane, and then Quentin Johnson rounding out the first round. And Dave, just before we let you go, is there anyone you're like, not even second round, but like maybe even like third round, you're like, this is a guy I'm going to try and snag later on in every draft? What's your kind of like sleeper pick?
So Tank Johnson, I think he landed in Jacksonville with Travis Etienne. Now there's a lot of, so when I look at his profile from an analytical point of view, there's some concerns. You know, he wasn't necessarily the most efficient player. But then you start hearing there was a lot of he was a very hyped up recruit. There was some criticisms about his athleticism, but then I think, in my opinion, he really smashed those at his pro day. I think that he showed that he does have the athleticism that people thought he had. The reasons around him was that the offensive line was absolutely putrid at Auburn, and that he kicks the ball too much out. And you know what? If I couldn't get any blocking, I would also try to use my athleticism to kick it outside and do what I can. I think that's a natural thing to do if you're just tired of running the ball up into the wall here. And what I've been told is he excels as an interior runner between the tackles. And I think someone who at that size complements Travis Etienne really well. And I think Tank can also catch the ball better than people think. So I think there's a lot of ways to have fantasy value there. And while I think most people are just thinking of him as as the foil to the Travis Etienne season, I think there's also ways to think of him as a positive fantasy asset as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Travis Etienne notoriously doesn't stay that healthy, right, as well. So that's another situation where you're like, oh, okay, can maybe like add up a couple of dots here, and maybe that foot issue comes back for Etienne. That's the kind of like smart decisions, right? That risk management. It's like not obviously hoping someone's going to get injured, but looking at historical data and who actually might end up getting injured, because, they often do.
Yeah. And two, I think like in going the second round too, I think this is a good place to swing on your favorite wide receiver prospect that, either like Josh Downs, you didn't get the draft capital you were hoping for, or the players who did get the draft capital that over the Cedric Tillmans that you thought that they, the players who basically surprised with draft capital, the NFL teams are obviously more higher on than we were in the fantasy community. I think that's a good point to take your Rashee Rices, the people, your stabs because of draft capital, because just the risk is less there, but then the upside is still there as well. Even though people always want to talk about, well, you want to load up on running backs, and look, don't get me wrong here, but I think in the second round is where I'm taking my swings on those wide receivers that I wasn't necessarily as high on.
Yeah, absolutely. So that brings us to the end of the show, Dave. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on to the hot seat again and letting us see what a 2023 rookie mock draft looks like with some of these landing spots. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening. And hey, if you've not by now, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. Me and Dave, we're going to work something out for this little giveaway as well. We'll maybe have a little chat or a few messages over, and we'll let you know soon what's going to happen with that. So make sure you've done that. And Dave, before you go, do you want to just remind everybody where can they find you online?
You can find me at FF_Spaceman on the tweet machine, my Patreon, which most of the content over there is free. There are some exclusive things that are behind a paywall that I think are extremely valuable for research purposes, for researching prospects. If you want data, I'm going to have it. If not, I'll go find it for you. And then two, over at DLF. And also this time, now that rookie drafts are starting to ramp up, after that kind of because everyone has they're like tomorrow, a lot of them are starting, and it's going to be, you're going to have 3, 4, or 5 days of rookie drafts. And then it's going to be like, now what do I do? Well, after that happens, that's when the charity aspect of fantasy football really kicks off. I'm very involved in the SFB Podathon, going into ahead of SFB 13, one of the best events on the fantasy calendar. It's a time to be charitable, and I'll be running a lot of the fundraising for the Podathon. We've raised a ton of money the last 3 years, and I'm really excited to put my time and effort back into that, because kids Toys for Tots is really passionate thing for me. And just I think that's one of the things, people want to slam each other for their takes, and come roast me for my this mock draft or this mock that we just did. I guarantee you, I'm not doing this for hot takes. I know we're in the hot seat here, and I'm trying to, people like the spice in the hot seat. This is how I will be drafting in my leagues. If not, come to me. Hey, let's do a $10 bet for Fantasy Cares. You really hate what I said about Anthony Richardson? You really hate what I said about your favorite wide receiver, your favorite running back, or your favorite QB? All right, come at me. Let's do a little friendly bet for Fantasy Cares for the Podathon, and let's just have some fun and do something that actually matters. So check out the Podathon, and also too, I know you're friends with the Fantasy Wildcard crew. The Mind charity, that's going to be awesome. That's coming up, and there's also all kinds of other important things that might matter to you. But yeah, so I'm really excited for the that part of the fantasy calendar coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. It is like such a giving community, and everyone is like just so generous with their time and with their wallets as well, which is great. And Scott Fishbowl coming to London for the first time live draft. I'm gonna be there. I can't wait. If you're listening, hey, come join me for the Scott Fish live draft. That'll be absolutely amazing. So Dave, speaking of amazing, you've been absolutely amazing once again, and just want to thank you one more time for coming on. And thank you everyone for listening. Remember, for anything Dynasty you need to know, keep it locked in the Certified Inferno, and we'll see you next time.